Hello? There we go.
Hello?
Hi, everybody. Good to see you all. We'll let you all take your seats as we transition. I'm Josh Feldman from NBCUniversal. I'm so incredibly excited to be here with Peter and Kari. Let me first start by apologizing to both of you. My magenta suit is in the dry cleaner, and normally I would be wearing it, so I apologize. But I've known Peter and Kari for a long time now, and I'm very excited for this conversation because not only are they both incredibly smart, but they're risk takers. They really challenge creativity, and a lot of brands talk about wanting to be first to market, but they really walk the walk. So it's always been a pleasure to work with them in a lot of different capacities. So very, very excited for this conversation today. So Peter, we'll start with you. I just sat here, listened to your keynote, and you talked about the merger. You talked about going through it, in difficult times. But can you talk about what the merger with Sprint actually meant for the brand itself, and also what it means for the marketplace, for the consumers as we look forward over the next couple of years?
I think the key thing about the merger, what we tried to do was take everything that we were doing as a brand as T-Mobile and only just scaling it on a much larger scale, because we talked about T-Mobile's network we were late to 4G, although we developed a very strong platform. But when you merge two companies, something happens. You have two network capacity twice the size. So we're taking that capacity and we're migrating customers, because that's the other thing that you have to do. You have to migrate all the Sprint customers who are on the Sprint network over to the T-Mobile network, and then what we call refarming all of their network onto T-Mobile, which then gives us this ability to have this powerful 5G network to do things like home internet. And we're not really stopping there. That's just like the touchstone of what we're trying to do. Because at the end of the day, connectivity, being able to use speed, and speed will become a factor on mobile devices probably in the next 2.5 years, I would say, probably, as you'll start to see that really take place. But then the power of what that can be. And then really just content being consumed so much more in the mobile environment, and having the ability to have a powerful network to deliver for our customers is just fantastic.
That's great. And just staying with that for one quick second, when you say speed, what exactly does that mean for us as consumers? Obviously how fast it goes, but how does that really relate to with what you're working on?
Well, what it really comes down to is so much of what we do today it's all about data. And data's pretty fast already, but it's things like being able to download a movie in 10 seconds. It's going to be that transformative when you actually start to see it. And being able to, stream in real time without buffering is also kind of been very critical to the marketplace. But the other aspects of speed will be to unlock things like being able to go to your doctor, or being able to have a checkup with your doctor and not being there, because you have the ability to do it basically from your home. And it's going to revolutionize that type of thing, which opens up, in my mind, to rural and small markets across America, where they'll actually have the ability to have a way better experience than they're able to have today.
Great, thank you. Kari, we'll ask you now. Moving over to the media marketplace, obviously there's been some pretty seismic changes happening over the last couple of years. From your perspective, what's been some of the biggest change in the way consumers and advertisers view and interact with marketing campaigns in general?
Yeah, I think that, the obvious one is the explosion of streaming services, right? And the consumers, when everyone was at home consuming their content from home, that changed behaviors, right? A lot of channels and where we used to invest no longer are relevant. But I think as more streaming products come to market, makes sense, right? Publishers are taking control of their content, and that makes good sense for the business. But from a consumer standpoint, it's starting to become confusing of where to find content. Right? It's no longer a one-stop shop. My dad called me up. He couldn't find the Mariners on TV. It was on Apple TV on Friday, right? That's a new consumer behavior that we have to start training. And then from a media standpoint, trying to find those audiences on all of those streaming services, lack of standardization. Every platform has its own nuances, ways to buy. Managing the buy becomes incredibly difficult. So I think that we're at the beginning stages of trying to figure it out. But it definitely makes it a complex conversation, and as we try to problem solve.
Well, it feels a little bit like the early days of cable, right? Where there was so much new out there, and now you're finding that again with streaming. Do you feel you're repeating or thinking of ways, like based upon some of your learnings from the past?
A little bit. I think where I have more optimism is, at least in the new world, well, hopefully the vision is to be able to standardize things and measure and get real-time data back versus the cable days where you just kind of sent your creative out there and you hope it was doing something. I think the ability to hopefully start thinking about the planning, the buying, and most importantly, the measurement component of that, I think that the opportunity is there. We're far from being able to take advantage of it, but at least the opportunity is there to start thinking about managing frequency, incrementality, and developing more test and control groups.
That makes perfect sense. So let's stay with you for a second and keep that thought, right? So it's not just about finding the audiences. It's when you're with a media company, it's truly partnering with them and doing things to break through that clutter. So what do you look for when you are partnering with a media company?
Flexibility, as you guys know, and true flexibility. I think partners that we work best with have a common starting point, right? That we know that there's always a balance of where our brand and where the content kind of come together. And we're going to continue to push those boundaries. But we want people and partners that will go on that journey with us, right? That are fluid and we can bounce ideas off of, and they're receptive, and we kind of work and go back and forth. And I'm sure Peter can attest to some of one of the most successful partnerships are the ones where we have a seat at the table and really talk to you about what we jointly want to go do.
Yeah, I was going to say having a joint objective is always the best North Star in any type of relationships like this, because partnerships, partners have needs, brands have needs, and it's when you jointly align on something that you can both achieve together is where I think we've seen the biggest benefit by far.
I said at the top of this that you guys walk the walk, right? These are not sound bites for a panel, and I could say that with working with both of you firsthand. I think back a couple of years ago, we did a first of its kind partnership between T-Mobile and The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon. And that was something that we kind of came up with the concept of what it could be together. We realized the value of what it could be together, but then we truly built it from the ground floor up. It was certainly not something off the shelf. And while it's never always easy when you're dealing with a show like that and building something from the ground floor up, it's a lot of fun at the same time because you're able to build that directly into what you want it to be. So in partnering, and I'll be very selfish here, being from NBCUniversal, partnering with a company like ours, where it's not just The Tonight Show, but it's the World Cup on Telemundo, you're a big partner with as well. How do you think about when you're dealing with media companies that have such a diverse set of properties to deal with, how you approach that from a brand perspective?
Well, from a true brand perspective, we take each one uniquely and look at it and make a determination about how we want to show up. And I think the example of Fallon in Central Park, a lot of brands would go like, ooh, like, what would you want to do? And we said, we're going to turn it into a big magenta night in Central Park is basically what we did do. And like anybody who was walking in Central Park could not miss that there was something going on. And it just happened to be with Fallon, and it was amazing. And I remember the first time we initially talked about this idea, and because they brought us like 10 or 12 different ideas, and we're like, that's the one we want to go do because it's big and bold and something nobody's ever done before. And it came with a lot of risk too. But at the end, it really showcased that the combination of the two brands made for even a bigger, more special night that we could have ever imagined. But like anything, as we approach, it's not just about creative, although creative plays a very big role in how we approach all of our partnerships. But it's how you take that creative and then leverage it and go beyond just what you would think about on more, I use the word traditional, but it's not just a traditional approach to anything. It's really thinking through how we can take and leverage our brand and make it the most relevant for the people who are going to consume the content.
Great. So you mentioned earlier measurement as something that was obviously very
Your
important.
favorite topic?
So it's about reaching the right viewers in the right way, but also measuring impact. It's not just how many viewers you're reaching, but what is that impact truly going to be? So what do you think the future of measurement needs? How do you think it needs to change in order to align with what T-Mobile needs to accomplish?
Yeah, I think there's a lot that needs to change. I think that standardization, right? There's a lot of silos out there, which is one thing, but when every silo has its own way of doing things, it creates inconsistencies and it doesn't allow us to actually tie the media investment back to the business outcomes that matter to us. So I think that, as we're working with partners, iSpot being one of them, it's great. NBCU is now kind of going in with iSpot as well, forging into new partnerships to get hopefully more granular type of data to tie back to those audiences. Because right now we're spending on TV, we're doing a lot of work and due diligence on the planning part of it and the buying part of it, and then you go to measure it against those audiences, and you're left with questions. And so I think, leaning in and we're partnering with you guys on iSpot to say, hey, we're going to align on the audiences. Let's think about a different way to have our guarantees outside of demos. And hopefully in the back end, measure it based on those audiences that matter, and more importantly, how it ties back to growing our business. But a lot of work, we're at such the early stages. Like I said, because of the streaming offerings, all the digital offerings, which is now almost all media has digital offerings, it presents a greater opportunity to have more unified measurement approach. But we're scratching the surface of just having conversations to figure out how to get there.
And, broadening that, do you approach it differently with a social platform versus a media company versus, other forms, or do you approach it the same way?
Unfortunately, you have to approach it differently, right? So, there's opportunities. We would love to do more test and control groups, but we can do it in pockets of our buy. We can do it with Meta. We can do it, some holdout groups here and there to look at, business lift. But I can't do it with all of our partners, most of our partners. I can't do that with. So then you're taking data from different ecosystems and trying to say, well, that's directionally heading that way, that's directionally heading that way, but you can't look at it across the board really and make different decisions about the approach across the platforms. So that's a challenge. We have the only thing, historical view of mixed modeling can kind of give you some information, but we don't have patience. I want to know, our partners are here. We want to know what happened last weekend. I don't want to know what happened a year ago. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's a challenge for the entire industry that I think we're finally approaching head on and heading in the right direction after a long time. Can I ask how much time? 12 minutes? Okay, great. So are you two open to audience questions? Sure. Is the audience open to audience questions, I guess, is the question. So if anybody has a question for Peter and Kari, now's a good time. And I don't know if we have a mic back there. We could kind of throw it. If anybody has a question, you want to raise your hand and ask a question? I should have warned you guys at the top of this. I know how this works. It was like, I threw this upon you, but now's a good opportunity. Any questions here? Here we go.
Great, thank you. This first one is for Peter. I'd love to hear a little bit more about 5G. And you talked a little bit about where it goes beyond just being able to watch a film without buffering or being able to download a film in 10 seconds. These things are great, but they don't fundamentally change our world. But, autonomous driving, that has the power to change our world in a very positive way. Would love to hear, one, you mentioned you already are having starting some tests in that arena, one, and then also what other applications are you seeing that are really exciting where they would not be possible without 5G?
Sure. So, a lot of the use cases for 5G right now are actually business use cases. So leveraging it in factories across the country and being able to get real-time data that will tell you exactly what's on the production line and what needs to be done. And you don't have to be there because you have data. We at T-Mobile actually use it. We pilot drones that go up and check out our towers, and they're all based off of 5G technology, and they're able to report back to our centralized engineers what the heck is going on with the tower. Is there an issue with it? They can go up, and that's before you have to send out the technician to go get it. This is like real-time data collection of information, and I think that's really the power of it. And we talked about the autonomous vehicles. We've been piloting them in Las Vegas for about a year, right? I mean, I think it's almost a year, and they're really trying, because it's kind of this odd thing. People are like, autonomous vehicles, do I want that or do I not want that? But probably in 10 years, you're probably going to say this might be the thing if a car just shows up at your house. But for consumers, like I said, you're going to see, if you think about the 4G era was all about apps on your phone. That is what the big consumer application. We've been investing a lot in bringing folks into our 5G lab in Bellevue, Washington, to try to be creators. Like, what are the things that are out there that they should be creating? And we have an infrastructure and a fund that's helping fund some of these startups to develop the things at the consumer level. So it'll be interesting. I don't know the consumer application yet that is going to be like, oh, that's it. But it's coming. I can tell you that.
And then just a quick question for Kari. And what are you most excited about? I know obviously you mentioned about fragmentation, measurement is becoming still a challenge and will probably remain that way, even though we say we are addressing it, just based on how the ecosystems continue to be so disparate, really. But what are you excited about when you think about, 23 and putting that to work for T-Mobile?
I'm excited because the conversations that we're having with our partners are now just different. So, we're our friends here. I can't not mention the trade desk. We were meeting with them this morning, thinking about the future and how we think about our partners across, ad tech and publishing side and our agencies. Like, we are tackling problems now that I think can really be starting to get answered. And I think that it's collectively, I think, where everyone's intent is on the same page, NBC, iSpot, Trade Desk. I bet if you get all of us in a room, we all kind of want to, like, the North Star of where we want to go as an industry is now aligned. And that's exciting because I think in the past, people would say it, but you can't do it alone. Like, I can't partner just with a measurement company and not have NBCU or other partners there and able to transact their inventory the way that I want to buy it and the way that we want to measure it. So it's starting to feel like our industry is like starting to collectively want to tackle it, how we're transacting, hopefully outside of thinking about TRPs, but really doing it, not just sitting on a stage and saying, like, get rid of TRPs, but actually having conversations and piloting ways to look at how are we going to guarantee our television buys or our video buys. And we're inching along. I know it's still kind of slower paced, but we're actually starting to solve the problems collectively.
Is, for example, measuring on attention one of those things that you'd like to head towards, or what is for you the North Star?
I think we need, so our business, as Peter mentioned, happens within store or physical locations. So it makes it really difficult for us to think about, optimizing and measurement in real time because it's not in a digital environment. So I think that we are always looking for better kind of proxies to our business. Attention could be one. I don't know if attention is, correlated back to driving my business outcomes. That's where we need to do more of the more sophisticated modeling to say, what are those planned delivery or buying ways to buy that correlate back to my business outcomes? I think we have work to get done there.
Thank you. We have a question there.
As you started to bring all these different partnerships together, what's been the biggest learning or, I guess, obstacle in having so many different partners working towards the same goal?
there's so many partners. I think that's the hard one. But I think that the good thing is the conversations are very similar. So I might meet with the trade desk this morning and NBCU later. We're all kind of, in general, kind of pathing to the same, versus even a year ago, you might have totally two like different conversations of like, what the goals are, or what, a measurement company might want to do, but you don't really have the inventory there to back it up and the analysis there to really partner. So I think it's people talking together and trying to collectively solve it.
And then, from a creative standpoint, I mean, this is how you end up with, 30,000 different pieces of content having to be created. But in terms of experiential types of partnerships that we do, we actually try to bring similar things to every single one of our events. We have something called Club Magenta, and it will show up at ACL, or it'll show up at iHeart Festival in Las Vegas, or it'll show up at a T-Mobile branded event. But it's the same type of formula, and then it gives us the ability to pick up this concept and port it to the next thing. So it's transferable, which is, I think, is a way to approach creative in a little bit different way. Even if our content that we're producing has to be unique to what the event is, and we think that's super important. We just don't want to show up. I mean, we always say, if you're getting T-Mobile, you're not just getting our logo on something. There has to be much more deeper integration in how we think about everything, and that's where we do spend a ton of time with our partners thinking through all of that level of detail.
All right.
Kind of following up on what you just said about experiential events, and kind of wanted to get your take on maybe the next year, the next 5 years, the way that Web3 and blockchain are going to be able to tie the digital side of things together with those experiential events, and the way that you reward loyalty and, your best customers.
I mean, I'll take a crack at it. I mean, it's, clearly some of this stuff we're already thinking about, like what's the next evolution of T-Mobile, our T-Mobile Tuesdays app, because it's already there and it has the ability. We already connect with so many of our customers. How can we actually take it to the next level? Our partners at Deutsche Telekom actually have begun dabbling on both platforms, being able to, through the use of blockchain, offering some of the stuff that they're doing at small scale. We're going to try to port and work with them to say, because we believe we can only have one across the globe, one sort of approach to this on a universal basis. Even though our brands, we're T-Mobile in the US, they go by Deutsche Telekom or T abroad. We believe there's unique factors because it's a global community. Because I will tell you, the way that our content gets consumed outside the United States is giving them great brand perception. So it's going to be really interesting to see how we can dovetail that.
Yeah, I think we're the early stages of figuring that out, because you're right, the experiential part and Web3, like we don't have the silver bullet to know exactly what we're going to go do, but I think testing, learning, dabbling, looking who else is doing it that's interesting and take from them. I think we're at the beginning of that.
Great. Well, I think we're at time now. So Peter and Kari, thank you so much. This was really, really enjoyable, and hopefully everybody got something out of this. So thank you guys so much.
Thanks, everyone.